This is one of the most competitive MBA application cycles in memory, and today I'm interviewing the Assistant Dean of Admissions on one of the most competitive MBA programs, MIT Sloan. Please join me for this fascinating interview.
Welcome to Admission Straight Talk, the podcast dedicated to graduate admissions and helping you approach the application process thoughtfully and successfully. Your host is Accepted's founder and world-renowned admissions guru, Linda Abraham. At Accepted, our mission is to get you to that unforgettable moment when you read your acceptance email and shout, "Yes, I'm in!" Confident you'll be attending the perfect program to help you launch the career of your dreams.
Welcome to the 409th episode of Admission Straight Talk, Accepted's podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Are you ready to apply to your dream MBA programs? Are you competitive at your target programs? Accepted's MBA admissions calculator can give you a quick reality check. Just go to accepted.com/MBA quiz, complete the quiz, and you not only get an assessment, but tips on how to improve your qualifications. Plus, it's all free. Again, use the calculator at accepted.com/MBA quiz to obtain your complimentary assessment. It gives me great pleasure to have back on Admission Straight Talk, Dawna Levenson, Assistant Dean at MIT Sloan School of Management. Dawna earned her bachelor's and master's in management science at MIT Sloan, became a partner at Accenture, and then returned to MIT Sloan in 2007 as Associate Director of Academic Programs. She moved into admissions in 2012 and became Director of Admissions in 2013 and Assistant Dean in 2018. Dawna, welcome to Admission Straight Talk.
Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you. Now, I'd like to start with some general admissions questions and then move into more timely topics, if you will. Okay. Can you give an overview of MIT Sloan's full-time MBA program for those listeners who aren't that familiar with it, and obviously focus on the more distinctive elements?
Sure. So we have a 2-year MBA. We have a 1-semester core, and then 3 semesters to really shape the curriculum to meet your interests. We have 3 tracks. We have 1 in finance, 1 in entrepreneurship and innovation, and a 3rd in enterprise management, which is really, think of those as templates or maps for particular areas of concentration. We also have 3 certificates, 1 in business analytics, 1 in healthcare, and a 3rd in sustainability. And these have been designed so that people are able to actually do one of each if they're interested. You could imagine that you may do the finance track, but then want to apply it to healthcare. One other distinction I do want to make is that while the tracks are very specific to our 2-year MBAs, the certificates are actually open to not only our MBAs and the entire Sloan community, but actually the entire MIT community, which really brings me to my last point of distinction I want to make, which is we are in fact MIT School of Management. And that can mean as much as you want it to mean as an MBA student. You are able to get involved in classes and clubs and conferences throughout the institute to really help complement your MBA experience.
Can you take classes outside the Sloan School?
Absolutely. You can take classes. Yep. So you can take some of your electives throughout the institute. You can actually also take classes at several of the Harvard schools as well.
Okay, great. What's new at MIT Sloan other than a lockdown pandemic and the reality that we're all dealing with? I guess you also have a lot of snow, but that's not news right now.
No. It's hard to ignore the pandemic.
Yeah.
But what I think, and we absolutely should not, and what I think that has come out of that is lots of really interesting conversations in the classroom, as well as lots of very interesting projects. So many of our courses, which are in fact project-based, have in fact taken the opportunity to refocus a lot of the projects to different aspects of the pandemic and COVID-19, whether it be from a healthcare standpoint or whether it be infrastructure impact there, or, if you just think about from a global perspective, so many things have really been impacted. This has really, I think, shifted the conversation an awful lot. And again, MIT, if I may, MIT and MIT Sloan, we're really all about identifying and solving the world's biggest problems. And so there are those who've said we've been built for this time, and I think we're trying to do everything we can to really make a difference.
Can you give a couple of examples, maybe?
So let me think. So last spring, actually, right when the pandemic hit, one of our courses is called USA Lab. And for that lab class, all of the projects, which had been defined very differently early on, shifted focus to be very much focused on helping the companies that the student projects were working with figure out how to survive through the pandemic. This fall, all of our action learning lab classes have become virtual, which is become very, very helpful to their sponsoring companies all over the world. Because as I mentioned, companies have been impacted tremendously. And so as part of the action learning experience in the past, there's been a travel component tied to that has been funded by the company. Well, to the extent that the company itself is struggling a bit to still get the knowledge and expertise of our students and not have to worry about that has actually been quite a relief for many of these companies, a welcome change.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. How have pandemic restrictions, I mean, we've talked about kind of the positive
Yep.
side, if you will, of the pandemic. How have pandemic restrictions affected the MBA experience and program at MIT Sloan?
Yep. Okay, so let's start with last fall. And I think it's important to note, and we're not alone in this, but really the number one constraint that helps to define and shape the experience is the number of people who can physically be in a room at any point in time.
Mm.
And that is state of Massachusetts regulations. This past fall, that was 25 people. That include a faculty member, a teaching assistant, an AV assistant, and therefore 22 students. And so understanding that, when we were developing, we opened the campus in the fall to any students who wanted to come on campus. Anyone who was able to get there from around the globe was able to come. The number of in-person classes they had, though, was very much driven by what I was just describing here.
Right.
And so if, in the simplest of terms, many classes are a Monday, Wednesday class. And so as you can imagine, we would have a group of students in the classroom on the Monday and also a second group of students being virtual. And then on Wednesday, we would have a different group of 22 students in the classroom. Exactly. Now, depending on that, the number of those who could be online would vary very much actually by faculty and what they were willing to do, because they could in fact have students who were only online. And so you could actually register for a class. And this isn't necessarily your first year core experience, but just in general, the experience, you could actually register for a class either in person, which would put you in one of those one day, 22 student, or online only. And many of our faculty were really generous with what those numbers would look like. The spring, from an academic standpoint, is going to be very similar. What I think we need to figure out how to continue to do better is, in fact, all of the co-curricular activities. And so they also were all virtual. And we're hoping that this spring we'll be able to have some of those in person, following, again, similar guidelines with regard to the number of people who could potentially be in the room. But students, all of our students, they really crave in-person experience and being together. And so we're trying to think of creative ways to be able to address that.
Right. I think most schools figured out how to handle the classroom experience fairly well, maybe not 100% like it was. I think it's the extracurricular, the more casual interactions that are a struggle.
Correct. I would totally agree.
Right. Um, on moving away from the pandemic for a moment, a rather blessed moment. Um, what don't people know about MIT Sloan that you would like them to know, or what is a common misconception about MIT Sloan that you'd like to get rid of?
So that's what don't people know? I often think perhaps the caliber and quality of our finance ecosystem gets overlooked. I know that when people are thinking of applying to business school to pursue a career in finance, we may not be at the top of their list. And I think people are pleasantly surprised when they arrive to really see the outstanding faculty we have, the ecosystem that we've built around courses and clubs and competitions in the field of finance. I think that's actually a bit of a surprise to people.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, typically, you'd be traveling the world, or maybe at this point in time, you may not be traveling the world quite as much because just of the time of year. But if not this minute, it's now late February, mid February. Certainly by late spring, you start traveling, um, and you'd be traveling with MIT Sloan students. How can prospective students engage with the Sloan community if you can't and your students can't go to them and can't get together with them?
Yeah, so we have migrated to a 100% virtual recruiting engine, which includes a variety of different events. Quite frankly, some actually we think are actually more effective and have a wider reach than in the past when we did travel. So there are some benefits and definitely some lessons learned here. We host traditional info sessions online. We have a faculty lecture series that we're continuing to add to, where we have faculty speaking that you can either watch the original or we then have it recorded and you can watch the faculty recordings. We're doing a tremendous number of, we'll call them coffee chats, which is a much smaller group of people, maybe 15 or 20 with someone from admissions and potentially a student or an alum, to engage in conversations like you and I are having right now, Linda. And those have seemed to be very, very effective.
Right.
So
Yeah, it sounds like you like a lot of people are doing the best you can under the circumstances.
we are trying.
That's the name of the game. Now let's turn to the application. Okay, Sloan has a fairly distinctive MBA application with lots of different components, and I'm wondering if you can take a second to go through kind of the purpose of these different elements, because I think a lot of applicants, they kind of look at it and it's almost random to them. So what is the purpose, let's say, of the cover letter, the focus on a one-page resume, the 1-minute video introduction, the organizational chart? I think you're the only school that requests an organizational chart. If not, you're the only one. You're one of the few. Can you touch on that?
Yep. I think that's, yeah, happy to. So this is how I like to think about this.
Okay.
So we completely understand that the application is, you're not going to tell us everything there is to know about you, but you're going to tell us enough for us to want to know more. And you're going to give us enough information for us to have a good sense that perhaps you are, from a capability standpoint, capable of doing the work. If you think about the cover letter, the resume, and the video together, I think of that as a package to tell your story. The resume is your work history. The video is who you are personally, what gets you up in the morning, what excites you. And the cover letter is really meant to tie it all together in why MIT Sloan. Think of those three things together and look at those three items together. The one required letter of recommendation is, quite frankly, our desire that if you're only asking one person for a letter of recommendation, you're going to spend the time really thinking about who that person might be. And you're going to invest the time sitting down with him or her, explaining what your interests are. And so, we're going to get from them a meaningful letter of recommendation. The two references are, to the extent that we have additional questions that we may want to, find out or ask about you, we have other people for whom we can call and contact. And it would never be a cold call. People worry about that. We would obviously email them and ask them if we could, speak with them at a mutually convenient time. So it's important to let your references know about it, but I think manage their expectations in terms of how we might or might not get in touch with them. The org chart, truth be told, we've actually borrowed this from our Sloan Fellows MBA program, which is a program for more senior individuals. And it just helps give us a visual around where you stand within the organization. It is not meant to be a traditional org chart. It is not meant to be, if you work for a large company, the org chart that sits on their website. It's almost like a relationship map. Put yourself in the middle of the page, and then, to whom do you report? Who reports to you? With whom do you interact? And it just helps give us a better sense of that. Pre-interview questions. So what we have two pre-interview questions this year. And the first one is around the mission of the school, which is to develop principled and innovative leaders who can improve the world, and to advance management practices along the way. And that part of that to us is an important element of that is to create a diverse environment. And so we're asking you to share with us a time when you contributed to the diversity of an organization or a group. And then the second essay is, I love this actually. It's more, and these are my words, so I apologize, but the gist of it is we're asking you to submit a one-page data visualization, either one that you've seen that has attracted your eye and your attention, or one that you have created on your own, to share it with us. And then in the interview, it's actually a great icebreaker. We ask you to, tell us why did you pick this? Why is it important to you? And what do you want to make sure I get out of this? And so it really helps us just assessing your overall communication skills. Again, what is important to you, depending on what you choose. And it's a very, like I said, it's a really nice icebreaker.
Great. Thank you. That was outstanding. It was a great answer. I did not specifically ask about the interview because the video is so clear and concise that I'm just going to link to it from accept.com/409. And you did that video. It's just a very informative video.
Great.
What do you think is the most common mistake, applicant's mistake that you see? What is it?
I think, can I give you two?
You can give me as many as you want.
Well, and because I think one, from a pure, so literally what your question is, an applicant. I think an applicant's mistake is, not following directions. We ask for one letter of recommendation and you send us 10. We have word limits on the cover letter, and it's 3 times. We're not, if it's 5 words over, that's fine. If it's, 500 words over, that's a bit of a flag. So really, paying attention. I also think perhaps not thinking through the recommender carefully enough and picking somebody. So we are not assessing the recommender, we are assessing the applicant. Therefore, we quite frankly don't care about the recommender's title. If you have bumped into the CEO of your company in an elevator once and think that you're comfortable now asking him or her to write your recommendation, but they really can't say much about the impact you have made, then that is a waste of a recommendation. So what we want for recommendations is really somebody who can speak to the impact that you have made on an organization or a group or a team of people. I think, though, the other mistake that people make, and quite frankly, it's not about applicants, it's about people who choose not to apply, is that you feel that you don't have a chance of getting in. And it could be for one single reason that you just think is a hurdle that you cannot overcome. And I guess I would really like to say to people, give it a shot. You never know. There's a lot of misconceptions out there, I think, across the MBA landscape of, what if in fact certain things outweigh others. A perfect example might be a GMAT score. And so I think that, everybody wants to put their best foot forward. I completely understand that. And I think that you should not let one specific attribute or element about yourself discourage you from applying.
I can remember a client who came to us and had been told by others that she shouldn't apply. And I'm pretty sure it was to MIT. And because she went to a no-name undergrad. Her grades were good, but she went to no-name undergrad. We encouraged her to apply. And she I think is at this point graduated from MIT Sloan. But
perfect example. Perfect.
Yeah. She had a lot of other stuff going for her.
Don't try to second guess. Give it a shot.
Right. Don't reject yourself.
That's right.
Now, in light of the pandemic and the crazy end to last year's admission cycle, are you reading applications with a slightly different perspective, looking or weighing certain attributes more or less than you did before the pandemic?
I think that's a great question. And I think where that probably comes into play the most is around people's work history, and the fact that we completely understand that many people may have been laid off early on, especially during the pandemic, and the challenges with finding another job. And so I think we are very understanding of that. I think it's interesting to see how people have chosen to spend their time if in fact it's not in a traditional job. And so there's definitely data in that. But I don't think people should suddenly feel like they're a knockout if in fact they've been impacted by the pandemic from a work history standpoint.
Okay, I guess that goes back to the previous question too, in some respects, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Now, MIT, I think one of the biggest pieces of news, which we've kind of danced around, is that MIT is test optional this year. Are you missing the test score as you evaluate at least some applicants? Do you plan to continue with test optional? Are you enjoying not being under the tyranny of the test, not dealing with it?
So good question. The honest answer is it's too soon to tell.
Okay.
I can tell you that a large percentage of people still submitted a test score, whether that be GMAT or GRE. I can tell you that we modified our application to make it very easy and to encourage people to share additional information with us that would help us assess their ability to be successful in a Sloan classroom, whether that might be a CFA certification or online classes that they have taken or other certifications that they've done. And that's been very, very helpful for us. I think we've just sort of fully completed round one. Deposits were due this week, and we're now in the process of reading round two and identifying who to interview. I don't necessarily think that we're seeing a tremendous, and we don't feel like we're at a disadvantage because that everybody does not necessarily have a test score at
Okay,
all.
great. All right. Can you touch on MIT Sloan's early admissions program? Whom is it for, and how can one get in?
Absolutely. So we are in our third year of this cycle. MBA early admission is targeted at undergrads and grad students who have not yet worked full time. So if you've been in a situation where you've pursued your undergrad and then went immediately onto graduate school, you are eligible.
Master's and PhD, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter as long as you haven't had full-time work experience,
Okay.
really. For MIT students who may be listening, there's actually an MIT application deadline in November. For all non-MIT students, that application deadline is in the spring. It's sometime early April. And it's for the most part very comparable to the actual MBA application itself, because we're looking to assess very similar qualities. It does include an interview. If admitted, we ask for actually a pretty small deposit of $750, and you then have 2 to 5 years to actually matriculate, go off into the world, work. We will reach out to you every year and say, is next year the time? Is next year the time? We do it in round one, so we have a good sense of how many people will be doing it to let us know how many seats we have available. But for people who are, I'll say, college seniors who think that an MBA is in their future, it is really, I think, a great thing to do to apply now, and just to have that security to know that you actually can you have a seat in an MBA class when the time is right for you.
Approximately how many people have these acceptances per year?
Yeah, you know what? It's just too soon to tell. We are again in year 3. We're just, if I was 10 years out or even 5 years, I might be more comfortable sharing. It's just too new.
Okay. Okay,
us.
fine, no
Really
problem.
very new.
And what was I going to ask? I guess none of them have matriculated yet, right? Because they're or
Right.
have any.
No, this fall we have, I think 11
Couple.
people have expressed their intent to apply fall to matriculate fall 2021.
Got it. Okay. Now I know
But
some
can I just add one thing? Can I add one
Sure.
thing to that
Of
that I
course,
think?
of course.
So I think what's important to note is that this is a separate channel to be admitted to the MBA program. Once you actually matriculate in that year, you're just an MBA student.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
not like a separate track for MBA early, and there's not special programming or anything, and you don't wear a big label that says I was admitted MBA early. You are part of the MBA class who happen to have been admitted through a slightly different channel.
Got it. Well, that's a great point. Thank you. And are there any requirements in terms of what they have to do in the 2 to 5 years?
So ideally, people are, are working professionally and, gaining experience that would be relevant in an MBA classroom. That could perhaps be your own venture. It could be working for a traditional firm. We have a process set up by which, when you express your interest, we have a conversation to make sure that we agree that this is the right time for you. So it's pretty loose.
Got it. All right. Now, sometimes I've talked to applicants and they've expressed the following concerns about applying this year. And I'm going to guess the concerns are going to be fairly similar for next year too. And that is they're concerned, A, about graduating into a weak economy, especially I think this cycle, or B, applying when deferrals may have shrunk the number of available seats and when there was a spike in applications. Because the press has definitely reported the spike in applications and there were more deferrals, I think, at MIT also from last year. I'm not talking about the early admissions program.
Yep. Correct. Yep.
How would you address those two concerns?
So I think people shouldn't overthink this. I think if this is the right time for you to apply for personal reasons and professional reasons, you should go for it. And you should apply, and you should put your best application forward. We are a school that who welcomes reapplicants. We don't necessarily hold that against you at all. In fact, we think that's a sign of, you're pretty persistent, which we like. And so to the extent that you apply and you don't necessarily get in this year, and you apply again next year, you're more familiar with the process and you can build on the experience that you had. So, and I'm not saying that everything you described is not true, because yes, application volumes have increased, and yes, the number of people who requested a deferral last year was significantly more than previous years. But also, again, don't overthink this. Not everybody who requested a deferral last year is in fact matriculating this year.
Of course. Right. And I think that the key point is that if you are ready to apply, now is the best time for you to apply.
I agree.
Yeah. Now, Sloan's round 3 deadline for September 2021 matriculation is April 12th.
Correct.
Is there a difference in the way you evaluate a round 3 application from a round 1 or round 2 application? And do you have any last minute tips for applicants applying round 3?
Yeah, so we don't assess people any differently. The reality is we have much fewer seats to fill by the time we get to round 3. But in terms of the qualities that we're looking for, it's all the same. So, I think a lot of people who apply in round 3 are perhaps people who an MBA was not on their radar necessarily, or they were going to think about applying next year, and then something happened that accelerated that process. And so the caliber of people who apply in round 3, I don't think there's a huge differential there either. I think it's all very, legitimate experiences and reasons for doing so. So, put your best application forward. And again, if you don't get in this year, you can reapply next year.
Right. What advice would you give to someone thinking ahead to a round 1 or round 2 application in fall 2021, planning to matriculate in 2022? So they have time on there. They have,
So this is what I'll say, and I say it in
side.
any info session that I conduct. I said it earlier today to a group of people as well. To the extent that you're now thinking about applying next year, apply as early as you possibly can. And the reason is not because we have quotas, it's because we don't have quotas. And so it's not like we say we're going to admit half the class in round 1 and, with 25% in round 2 and 25% in round 3. At any point in time, we are looking to admit the best qualified people for our program. And then depending on how, what the acceptance rate is in terms of them accepting our offer, I guarantee you we will have less seats in the next round. In addition, right? I mean, that's just
math.
Right. In addition, if you apply in round 1 and you're waitlisted, you will be considered as part of the round 2 pool, not after the round 2 pool. So you apply in round 1, and for some reason you don't get in and you get waitlisted, you have a very good chance of being seriously considered in round 2.
Okay. Wonderful answer. Thank you. Is there anything you would have liked me to ask you?
So I think, is now the right time to pursue an MBA? Because a lot of people will ask that. And I think I probably covered bits and pieces of it as we were chatting, but maybe to just bring it all together.
Sure.
I think, and as a lot has happened in the world in the last year. A lot of things have to be fixed as a result of this. I think pursuing an MBA now, the discussions that are happening in the MBA classroom, the opportunities that will be available to people once they complete. The world needs principled, innovative leaders now more than ever. And so to pursue your MBA now, all other things lining up, I think is a perfect time.
Wonderful. Thank you. What a great note to end on. Dawna, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can listeners and potential applicants learn more about MIT's full-time MBA program?
Sure. So you can go online to sloan.mit.edu.
Thanks again, Dawna. We'll include links in the show notes at accepted.com/409 to the site Dawna just mentioned, as well as to related articles and interviews. They're all linked to from accepted.com/409. Quick reminder, don't miss the MBA admissions quiz. Find out if you are really ready to apply. Competitive at your target schools. And what are those tips for improvement that I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast? Take the quiz at accepted.com/MBA quiz and find out. It's all free. Listener, thank you too for joining Dawna Levenson and me for our 409th episode. If you find the show worthwhile, please subscribe. Make sure you don't miss any future shows, be they with admissions directors, professors, current students, test prep pros, or alumni doing great things. Thanks again for coming. This is Admission Straight Talk, produced by Accepted, and I'm your host, Linda Abraham. I'll talk to you again next week.